Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we will be discussing bar innovation, product development for a shifting market. My name is Jennifer Caveney, and I will be facilitating today's presentation. Before we begin, just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out following the discussion. If you do have questions, we encourage you to enter them into the questions box, and we will do our best to answer following the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. I have the pleasure of introducing our two speakers today. Our first speaker is Brent Fairbrother, Product Development Project Leader for Eurofins Product Development and Innovation. He has been a driving force at Eurofins Product Development and Innovation for over 18 years, where he's played a pivotal role in transforming early stage concepts into commercially successful products. With deep expertise in product development and a collaborative spirit, Brent has partnered with companies ranging from startups to global brands, helping them navigate the journey from innovation to market launch with precision and purpose. Our second speaker today is Megan Houseworth. Megan is a food scientist with Eurofins Product Development and Innovation with over 5 years of experience in product development. She specializes in bar formulation, ingredient sourcing, shelf life testing, scale-up trials, contributing across diverse formats and R&D initiatives. Megan holds a bachelor's degree from Virginia Tech and a master's in food science and technology from Oregon State University. Brent, whenever you're ready, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Jen. I think probably everybody listening has some idea of who Eurofins is, but we'll kick it off there, just who Eurofins is, and then more specifically the Eurofins Product Development and Innovation group that Megan and I are a part of. So Eurofins is a group of international life science companies which provide a unique range of analytical and contract research services across multiple industries. And then the Eurofins Product Development and Innovation group, we've got offices in Ithaca, New York, where both Megan and I sit, and then also out in Lafayette, Colorado. Our primary focus is helping food and beverage and nutraceutical brands accelerate their innovation. We do this through science-backed formulation, through market insights, and manufacturing expertise. So pretty much, if you have a new product to develop, any sort of troubleshooting with current products on the market or line trials, those types of things, we're the folks within the Eurofins organization that will help you out. So today, focusing on the bar market in a little bit more detail here, what we're hoping to cover here is really help you understand what the current overview of the bar market is, what's the current state, what's that bar aisle look like, and then as brands, ingredient suppliers, those types of things, as you're looking to crack into this market or innovate in this market, what type of things should you keep in mind? So we'll approach that from a couple different formats. One would be formulation strategy end. So where are there opportunities to differentiate based on your formulation? We'll take a deep dive into that. And then as well as like when you're thinking of your brand, how can you position yourself slightly differently? Are there ways that you can adjust your format? Is there ways that you can reposition yourself in the store to stand out amongst your competition? In and among that, we'll sprinkle in some case studies, some kind of real world experiences that we've had here at Eurofins, just to kind of help add some power to our points there. And then lastly, we'll just touch on very quickly how we can support kind of our role in these types of projects and initiatives, and go from there. Okay, turning it over to Mike.
All right, so here, just kind of quick overview of the current bar market landscape. When we look at the bar market today, we definitely see that it's more saturated than ever. The bar aisle contains hundreds of SKUs that are all competing in a very similar product space. To help emphasize this point, when you search protein bars online at Target, there's 732 results, so kind of endless options from consumers to choose from. But a lot of times, consumers are overwhelmed and they perceive, bars as somewhat monotonous, whether it's their old, undesirable, chalky textures of some of the original protein bars, or just having repetitive, non-innovative flavors across all of the SKUs, to kind of just like underwhelming them with choices. Consumers are kind of feeling the space might be a little bit bored and tired when looking at the aisle today. So in order to kind of stand out, or when your brand is thinking about how they can stand out in this aisle or differentiate, it's kind of important to answer these two questions. So what unique values are you bringing to the market, and how do you plan to stand out? So brands can differentiate through a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's through formulation, actually changing the ingredients or nutritionals you're bringing in your bar. Other times you can look for opportunities in just your position, whether you're going to have a fun new package or a marketing approach to kind of help your bar stand out in that aisle, or looking for other opportunities to get your bar into different areas of the grocery store. So consumers, are just seeing your bar and they're not seeing the 50 bars next to you. And then also brands, you might consider, storytelling. Maybe you've got some new unique ingredients in your bar, or you've got a really personal take on how your brand was brought to life. So over the next couple of slides, we'll review some of the current market trends we've seen in a few case studies to help kind of show everyone some examples and provide some, deeper insights into how everyone can differentiate and refine their formulas to kind of re-engage and excite consumers.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, and I think we have a pretty unique positioning in the industry here, in that we're working with many different clients, ingredient companies, big brands, small brands. So we're really kind of at the forefront as to where there's movement in different categories. And so one area that we wanted to highlight here that we're seeing a lot of is this move to whole and pantry ingredients. So moving away from those chemical sounding additives towards a simpler, more recognizable ingredients. And I should say this is obviously not specific just to bars, right? We're seeing this across the food industry in general, but the bar category definitely follows in the same direction. There's clean label expectations from consumers, right? They don't want to see 20 different ingredients on the ingredient deck. The fewer the better. And with that, they're starting to put an importance, or they're putting more focus on the ingredient quality. So what's in their product, what are those quality ingredients, over the importance of just like total number of grams of protein or grams of fat or calories. And I don't mean to diminish the importance of those nutritional values. Those are still top of mind for consumers. They're still looking at the nutrition facts panels, the front of pack callouts in those areas. But if it comes down to, hey, you know what, this bar is sweetened with honey or organic tapioca syrup versus maltitol syrup or what have you, and maybe it's got a couple extra grams of sugar, we're seeing, brands are more following that trend, and the consumer insight there that, yeah, you know what, I'll take a couple extra grams of sugar if it's an ingredient that I have in my pantry, it's an ingredient that I recognize. Some challenges that you're going to see here as you consider moving to more of these whole and pantry ingredients, as I mentioned on nutritionals, you're going to be managing higher fat contents, higher calorie contents. If you're using things like peanut butter or nuts and seeds, these are ingredients that inherently have a good portion of fat in them. It's going to bring those into your bar. You're going to have to manage that a little bit. A lot of cases you don't want to have more fat grams than protein grams. It's going to stand out to consumers as kind of a red flag, or hey, maybe this is no longer a healthy snack that I'm targeting, and maybe it's a little bit more decadent or indulgent. An example here of just move to whole and pantry ingredients. And this is probably not new to most of you, but RX Bar, right? They've been around for a while here, but they're kind of at the forefront of this with their no BS advertising, right? So you can see in the image there, 3 egg whites, 6 almonds, 5 cashews, 2 dates, and that's all that's in the bar, right? So it's very clean label, it's very recognizable from consumers. They've obviously done very well as a brand, and we've seen a swing with many brands of all sizes also following in this footstep. This is a little bit of a wordy slide here. This is positioned as a case study, and I know you guys all get the deck after. So I'm going to speak generally to this. I'll try not to read it back to you, but this is a case study that's essentially we've worked with, again, a number of companies. In this case, this was somebody who was an established brand. They had snack bars on the market, and they were already positioned in that whole food, that pantry food, style as one of those types of products. But they wanted to come up with a new platform or a new SKU that was focused on delivering grams of protein. But they didn't want to lose kind of that brand ethos that, hey, these are just real ingredients that people know and love and will recognize. And so what we did, what I think is very important for any brand or anybody setting out to launch a bar in this space, right, is really let's take a deep dive into the market. And this doesn't have to be, buying of Mintel reports and those types of things, but just consider, if somebody's not going to buy your product that you're going to develop and launch, what would they be buying instead, or what are they currently buying? Look at the market from that perspective. So if you're a whole food, pantry food style bar, and that's what you're hoping to develop, go out there and obtain some of those products from the market, do your Google searches, check out Target, check out Amazon, see what's for sale there, and start to look at what are the common ingredients that folks are using. How many grams of protein are they delivering? What type of front of pack claims are they making? All this stuff can become relevant as you put together your scope, so to speak, or your design guardrails for your product. And this is not just to make a Me Too product, say, well, everybody's using pea protein, so I'm going to use pea protein. But you might find as you dive into this, there's going to be certain attributes of the bars and of the formulations out there that seem to be must-haves that consumers are looking for, right? If there's 50 brands out there all doing, one or two things, there might be a good reason for that. Maybe they've invested in the consumer research and have gotten to the bottom of that. But you may also find opportunity areas. So you may say, hey, you know what? Nobody's blending these types of proteins together, or nobody is hitting, this fat content with this protein content in the space. You might be able to find some white space there, again, to help you stand out, to reposition yourself and give yourself a little bit of that competitive edge. Okay. As you dive into this strategy a little bit further, again, we talked about having to manage those nutritionals a little bit. So it's great to say that you want to have 20 grams of protein in your whole pantry ingredient bar. But what you'll find there is it's going to be very hard to hit that protein target just by using the natural ingredients or the whole ingredients, especially when you're typical serving size of one of these bars, say 50 to 60 grams. Can you really get to 20 grams just with nuts and seeds and other whole foods? It's going to be very challenging. More than likely, you're going to fall in that 12 gram range. Maybe if you add a pea protein crisp or something like that, you can push 15 grams. And to get to 20 grams, now you're looking at isolates or concentrates needing to be added. And you're going to have to think, again, what do you want your bar to look like? What's your overall delivery? So if you start adding in the isolates or the concentrates to drive up that protein target to higher level, now maybe you're making more of a dough. Maybe it's going to be less likely that you're going to see the sunflower seeds or the peanut pieces or whatever in your bar because you've added enough of those powder ingredients that are going to fill in all those voids and take away from that natural appeal. So all things that you have to consider as you're kind of setting your targets for protein content, ingredient selections, those types of things. And you may come into a situation where you're like, hey, you know what? Everything's matching up pretty good here, but my fat is a little bit too high or my sugar is too high. Well, there, a couple areas that you're going to want to look into is, well, what's your binder selection, right? Are you just using peanut butter as an example to kind of hold all this together? Well, that's obviously high in fat. Can you cut it with something else? Maybe you're going a little bit too high in your honey and it's driving your sugar too far. So what type of blends of ingredients can you pull together that are still on the kind of in that whole food designation that can help hold your bar together and help you manage things like your fat and your sugar? And then lastly, are there anything you can do with kind of deconstructed ingredients? So if you're using a lot of peanut butter, maybe you can use a defatted peanut flour as an example for a portion of that peanut butter to cut down on the fat being added to your formulation, but still have it be a relatively clean label ingredient.
All right, so our next trend here is moving, beyond just protein and whole food ingredients, as more often consumers are looking for multifunctional bars that include functional ingredients like adaptogens or fiber. I know fiber seems to be a hot topic on TikTok and Instagram right now, or other functional ingredients that provide certain mood or energizing boost to consumers. However, choosing what functional ingredients and what level to add to bars can be a bit challenging for brands, but there are kind of two pathways we see to this in the marketplace. So one approach is to identify some scientific data and some functional ingredients and try to use those at claimable levels in the bar. However, a big technical challenge when we're using high levels of functional ingredients is really trying to maintain a desirable texture and flavor. I know a lot of times when we go high in things, you'll see like reishi, lion's mane, or ashwagandha. You can have some pretty strong and potentially undesirable flavor profiles with those. And so the other kind of pathway we see with other brands on the market is they're sort of leaning into consumer perception of ingredients and or consumer education for functional ingredients. So for example, some brands will promote their product as having a specific time or use occasion. They might say that it's energizing or relaxing on front of pack and call out specific functional ingredients without directly relating the claim to the ingredient itself, which might kind of allow consumers to make connect the dots themselves and make those inferences without necessarily needing to go really high at a claimable level, so that they can preserve some of their more desirable texture and lower the amount of off notes from ingredients like this. One example of a product on the market that's using functional ingredients is IQ Bar. So if you look at that photo there, you'll see on that front of pack that they're calling out their plant protein, low sugar, and net carbs. But they do also have a small icon on that top right where they're calling out brain nutrients. So this is kind of an example of a brand that's maybe not making a specific claim, but they're kind of cueing consumers to the fact that there are other ingredients in their bar that have additional benefits outside of protein. So if you flip this over, you'll see I think this one has lion's mane. And then on the other side of this, they are doing a little bit of consumer education. If you go to their website, they actually list out a variety of other nutrients like magnesium, MCTs, vitamin E, and flavonoids, and then they explain to their consumers online how these ingredients are beneficial. So yeah, some really interesting things here. The next slide will jump into an example of a case study for functional ingredients. So in this example here, there's an established brand that was hoping to add more fiber to their bars by adjusting their formulation. So one example of this is the brand currently was using a blend of sugar syrups as their binder system, and they were really, hoping for an opportunity to reduce some of the sugar and add some of that fiber in for some functional benefit. But when we think about, replacing any part of your formulation, especially the binder system in a bar, this is rarely going to be as easy as a one-to-one swap. Anytime the binder is adjusted, it's very important to monitor and check things like water activity and viscosity of that binder. As most of us know, water activity is very important for shelf life, helping control microbial growth, but also if you did have large differences, when replacing your current binder to your kind of dry ingredient mixture, this can result in definitely some moisture migration and texture changes over time. The other attribute I mentioned earlier, viscosity, is also really key here. So, if you have a blend of sugar syrups and you're replacing them, let's say you found a new fiber ingredient that you want to swap in, making sure the viscosities are similar or maybe taking a larger approach to the whole formulation is important, because if the viscosity, if it's too low in viscosity compared to that sugar syrup you were using, you can see things like cold flow or pulling up the binder, potentially causing some deformation and shape changes of your bar over shelf life. On the flip side of that, if your new binder is too high in viscosity or solids, this can also impact your texture kind of the other way. It might actually be, you might find it to be much harder initially in shelf life, and then go on to be much harder over time, especially if it did see any like heat abuse during storage or things like that. So just some keys there. I think just kind of keeping in mind as we add functional ingredients to bars or we develop new bars with functional ingredients, just knowing that it's important to look at things like water activity and viscosity, and there are ways to mitigate. If you're seeing differences in viscosity or differences in water activity, we can do things like using a blend of different fiber syrups. Also, maybe adjusting the process parameters, whether it's things like mix time or temperature, to kind of create a new functional binder for your brand.
Okay, and taking it one step further, and I know we've talked about protein in a few of these examples, and zeroing in a little bit further there on protein. I think that's we were talking about the bar market, 700 and some searches come up, or results come up when you search protein bars at Target, right? So some ways to differentiate yourself could be looking at those alternative protein sources. So obviously plant-based proteins have become a very big industry. There's a lot of consumer interest in that space over the last handful of years. There's also things like fermented protein sources and upcycled ingredients and upcycled proteins to keep in mind. We've seen a lot of traction in these areas, a lot of folks exploring them, ingredient companies looking to develop them, those types of things. So important to highlight here. Now, when you are swapping in some of these proteins, I say swap, it's not quite as easy as just pulling out a whey protein or a milk protein and swapping in a plant-based version. You have to remember, milk proteins, whey proteins have been around for probably ever, right? And we're now at the point where you can call up an ingredient supplier and you can get a milk protein blend that is perfectly designed or very, very well designed for a chewy bar texture or a soft bar texture or any number of desired textures. We're not afforded that same luxury for the most part in the plant-based space. Ingredient companies are working very hard on this and have come up with some great solutions over the last handful of years. So we have a lot of great tools in the toolbox. But some technical challenges that you could see as you're looking at some of these alternative protein sources are, number one is going to be bar hardening. I think that's probably the number one mode of failure for bars across the market is, just over time those bars are gonna harden and become off-putting to consumers. You also have off flavors. Some of these proteins based on their source material and also their purity of protein. What else is still involved in that powder in that protein that could be driving some off flavors? So that's going to be a challenge that you're going to have to face and figure out how to solve. And then lastly is nutritional quality. Are you just interested in saying 12 grams of protein, or are you looking to make protein claims and have these be complete sources? Some plant-based proteins, fermented sources, those types of things are not going to be complete sources. So now we have to look into PETA-CAS values, digestibility, those types of things, and come up with a custom formulated protein blend that will get you to that complete source. So speaking to solution there, obviously the ingredient blends as I was just mentioning, but then there's also processing optimization that you may need to take into account. It's not going to be, again, just as easy as, hey, we already make a bar with whey protein in it, just swap it out, put in, this new protein source, and just assume everything is going to run perfectly. There's going to be some processing optimization, whether it's order of addition, whether it's managing, your temperature and your mix times and those types of things throughout production. Some care is going to have to be taken there. A quick example here of a group that is really diving into the space, looking into the alternative sources. This is the ACT bar, which actually I was just visiting their website a little bit earlier today. It's launching, I think November 18th, according to the website, is when you'll start to see this bar available. I think through purchase of their website. I think it may already be for sale on the West Coast and small market and small shops and things like that. But November 18th is what they have listed as their kind of formal launch date. So they're set out on a mission to feed more and waste less. So you'll notice they've got the upcycle certified tag on the bar, and they're actually utilizing upcycled brewer's grain on this to deliver their protein. So just very interesting. We talked a little bit earlier on in the presentation about kind of the story of your brand. So here, not only are they playing on the upcycle piece, but then they're also, you see, 1 bar equals 1 meal donated. So tackling a little bit of the kind of the environmental and then the social impact through their product. So just another great way to kind of stand out is, what are you giving back? How can you contribute in other ways outside of just making a great tasting product? And as we dive into a case study related to this here, we work with many different clients who are experimenting with these new proteins or trying to come up with, what's my way into the market? What can my protein blend, or what can my new upcycled or plant-based protein be that's gonna set me apart? And so in doing this, a few things that we've noticed, again, if you think of the protein quality. Some of these proteins are less refined. You're not hitting the 80 or 90% protein value. Maybe it's 50% protein or 60% protein. Well, what makes up the other 40% of that ingredient, and how is that going to impact your product? So in this case, we had some limitations there in terms of, okay, this is not a protein isolate that we're working with. So we only have so much space in our bar that we can put this in. Can we actually hit our protein targets with that material? And if yes, what other hurdles might we be up against? And so what we did here is we looked at the protein functionality. So we've got a suite of tests that we can run on any number of proteins to assess the protein functionality. Things like how well does it hold oil? How well does it hold water? And how do these things hold up over time? And so in this particular case, this novel protein we were working with, it was very good at holding water, not so good at holding oil. And so what we were finding is we're incorporating this into a bar, keeping other ingredient ratios roughly standard for what you'd expect to get an initial bar off the ground. It was becoming very dry and very crumbly. That protein was just out competing the other ingredients. It was grabbing onto whatever available moisture was available, and we weren't able to get these bars really to hold together. So we then looked into protein blends and also the order of addition and the processing of the ingredients. So how can we protect that protein a little bit from just wanting to suck up all that moisture? How can we bring other proteins in so we don't have to use quite as much? So we custom formulated that protein blend. We worked through the processing of that bar as mentioned, and found, hey, you know what? If we can increase our fat a little bit, is there a way that we can protect or create a little bit of a barrier between that protein and any sort of moisture source in the bar to prevent that moisture migration, prevent that dry, crumbly, and texture there. And so here, it was very important for us to not only see that initially at time 0 of the bench, but then also monitor that over time. So shelf life of bars, obviously big component of it. And we typically see, typically within the first, say, 2 to 3 weeks of storage of a bar, you can see a pretty big change in something like bar texture. If there's moisture migration happening, between components of that bar, you're going to see that happen relatively quickly. So it was important for us to monitor this to get an initial stability study set up and see how these bars are going to change over time, and then keep that continuous feedback loop with our client, but keep that iterative benchtop process alive. Like, okay, let's look at additional protein ratios. Maybe we need to change up that blend a little bit. How does the process need to change? So I think the takeaway here is as much as looking at some novel proteins, some upcycled ingredients, those types of things really can help set you apart from a branding standpoint and a consumer facing standpoint. Behind the scenes, just make sure you're going into that prepared, knowing it's not going to be just a quick one-to-one swap, and you're going to be able to run your current line like you always do and not have any issues. You're going to have some off flavors to deal with. You're going to have texture changes. You're likely going to have to update your process. You may even have to make some other formulation modifications to get your product to run. All that said, there's some great new proteins out there, that you definitely should not shy away from. There's solutions for many of them to develop your bars. Just something to be aware of.
All right, so our last trend for the day is related to alternate positioning and formats. So, we've been talking a lot so far about the ingredients and the formulation of the bar itself, but there are some other ways brands can stand out in this category. One being position. So where is the bar literally placed in the store? Right now we are seeing kind of an uptick in the number of refrigerated and frozen bars, so I think that's really interesting because it allows those products to compete in a less crowded part of the store. Also, there might be some consumer perception around the bars that are being refrigerated and frozen that they, contain less processed ingredients and are more fresh, and then kind of fall under that better for you halo, if you will. Another way brands are standing out is through the format of their bar. So brands are getting a lot more playful with the shape and texture of their bar. I know, the standard protein bar that came out at the start was, kind of that chalky, dry, single slab bar. But we're really seeing a lot of brands like Bear Bells or Built Bars, and they're kind of playing in this really soft, fluffy, dual texture space, kind of, more of that texture that we're all familiar with candy bars. So I think that's really an interesting format take they're doing. And then, of course, the other one that I have here as an example is Legendary. They're moving just outside of the standard protein bar. They're still delivering those classic high protein, low sugar nutritionals that are traditional to that space, but they're kind of pushing the boundaries of what that snack product is with things like donuts, toaster pastries, and cinnamon rolls. Again, potential there for them to also be placed in a different part of the store. Maybe it's the end of the protein bar aisle, so you see it right when you start walking down, or maybe it's the next aisle over. Again, hopefully, just being a little bit less crowded and getting an opportunity to stand out from the rest of the competition. But a couple challenges do come with these. Of course, if you are manufacturing or distributing a refrigerator frozen product, there's just added costs there. And then if you are going to do something like a donut or a cinnamon roll, and you've already got protein bars out there, that is going to involve some changes to your manufacturing capabilities. So might impact your pricing there, but definitely interesting ways we're seeing some brands stand out from the rest. And then we've got a case study for this one as well. So our case study for evolving formats involved a well-established health brand that was looking to kind of expand their product offerings. So they already had, a traditional snack bar out on the market, but they really wanted to create something new and fun for their consumers that would stand out. So they, ended up looking at different ways to differentiate and ended up landing on something that would change the format of their bar, so changing the shape and appearance. Challenges with this, as we kind of just talked about, is this did involve them needing to search for a new contract manufacturer. So even though they were already a well-established, brand, what might seem like making a small change to the shape, still making a slab bar, for example, and you just want to go from, let's say, a rectangle to a square, your current line might not even be set up to make that small change. So it's important to kind of, understand when you're looking for ways to differentiate, just being mindful of how that might impact things like scale up. So for these guys, we did help them with finding a contract manufacturer. And I just want to say, the co-man bar space is huge. There are a ton of different companies out there, but I think it's important to remember that not all co-mans are created equal. We all know to look out for things like capabilities and MOQs when talking to manufacturers, but I think for certain brands that are really trying to be innovative or do something that maybe hasn't been done before, definitely important to, find manufacturers that are willing to, troubleshoot and be innovative, maybe partner with an outside engineering group, or maybe they've got an engineering group in-house that's willing to kind of modify current equipment to make it work for the brand. Of course, big watch out there is just, as you look for ways to differentiate based on format or product type, is just, of course, the financials. Getting somebody to modify their line for your product or purchasing a new piece of equipment will definitely come with a significant investment there. And I think that's about it for here.
All right, and so really what we've been trying to do with this webinar is show you there's multiple different ways that that you as a brand or anybody who's looking to develop a new bar or maybe tweak an existing product line, there's many different ways you can approach that to help yourself stand out in that very crowded space of the bar aisle. Not saying you have to do them all into one product. You don't have to have the whole food, high fiber, high protein donut product, right? But any one of those, either as a standalone or starting to combine some of these strategies, could be good and could be right for you. At Eurofins Product Development Innovation, I think we can help you navigate from a strategy standpoint, as we've started to lay out here in the webinar, but then also from the technical standpoint, right? We understand how a lot of these ingredients interact, how water activity impacts your shelf life and these types of things. So we're happy to dive into the weeds with you there. And as we approach these projects and work with your team, we view ourselves as an extension of your team. So we try our best to be collaborative and transparent and solution oriented. So we're not going to approach any of these projects with like a one size fits all model, right? It's going to be a custom approach for you where we're going to make sure we're factoring in your business objectives and where you're trying to head as a brand. And we're going to custom design our program to help support you on that journey. As just mentioned, like we're very well versed in the front end innovation piece, helping you identify where's the white space, where does your brand have permission to play. There's another Eurofins lab based in Minneapolis who we work very closely with, as needed. big on the consumer research end of things. So we can bring those folks into the fold as well to add additional power to any sort of design brief or concept that you may want to bring to life. As we were highlighting here as well, ingredient functionality expertise. Again, we're not, we'll do the deep science. We'll dive in and make sure that the proteins we're selecting, the blends that we're pulling together, are right for your application. We've got the expertise in house. We've got the PhD scientists who can do that deep dive and help guide you through that process. And then also, speed and efficiency. We're very quick. We love to hit the ground running here. So we can take your concept, we can prototype that and have product back in your hands, in a matter of weeks. This is not a process that needs to take, many months or a year. Especially in the bar space, it's something we're very well versed in. We've got the benchtop and the pilot plant setups to help bring these to life very quickly. And then finally, manufacturing support. We've got our process engineers who we can send out to the field. Megan was just speaking to that last case study in terms of, identifying the co-packers, but then also supporting the trials and working alongside of our clients in those environments to help put together the protocols. What's the sampling plan going to be? How do we need to adjust the process to make sure the product is coming out and matching and meeting our expectations? So with that said, I hope you all enjoyed the webinar and understand that we are here to help you out any way we can. Please utilize us as a resource as you guys are moving forward in your journeys in the bar space. And I'll toss it back over to Jen.
Super. Thank you, Brendan, Megan. We do have some time for a few questions from the chat. So go ahead and pull a few of those out. So our first question, I am developing a clean label bar and have concerns with food safety. What additional testing should I be doing for clean label bars that are specifically being formulated without preservatives?
I can answer this one. So, anytime you're making a shelf staple bar, definitely, whether it's with or without preservatives, carefully checking and controlling for water activity is going to be important. Also, if you're working with any, new or novel ingredients, some strategies there would just to be review any new documentation, go over their COAs to kind of ensure low microbial loads. Depending on what ingredients are in your bar, you can also talk to suppliers and make sure the things you're purchasing are ready to eat. If your bar isn't going to see any heat or have a kill step or anything, most manufacturers don't for making traditional cold form bars. And then lastly, maybe also checking heavy metal content, things like that have come up in recent years.
Awesome, thank you. All right, another question from the chat. What is the best way to determine the target client for a new product coming to market?
I'll jump in on this one, Megan. I think, I guess the way I would interpret that is, you've got a product that you're looking to launch. How do you understand who you should target in terms of your marketing from a consumer perspective? And I would say, going back to our market landscape example that we gave earlier, I would come into your initial design brief or as you're pulling together your initial concept, and I would really think about who am I designing this product for? What's their day look like? What's the problem I'm trying to solve? Where's the gap in their life that I can help fill? So I would, as you're selecting the types of ingredients, the bar shape, the format, these types of things, I would really be thinking of who that client, who your consumer is early and often throughout the process. You can do that. You can go as in depth as you want. Like I said, bring in the consumer research team, and you can test concepts and check purchase intent and all these things. Or you can be a little bit more scrappy about it. You can again do your Google searching and look through Amazon and Walmart and Target and all these types of things, and just understand what's the lay of the land. I think I mentioned earlier, if they're not going to buy your product, what are they currently buying, or what would they buy in place? You don't want to wait too long to really identify who you're designing for. A lot of times us as scientists, right, we love to hit the bench early and start making products. But the question we always have to pause and ask ourselves is, just because we can make something, should we make it? Like, there's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of things we can bring to life. But if you don't have a market in mind, if you're not designing it with a purpose, could be a great technology, a cool new innovative thing that us science geeks are really going to like. But if there's not a consumer need, it's going to fail. So definitely early and often check in with consumers. Make sure you're designing towards some sort of problem or solution that you can provide them.
Perfect, thank you. All right, and another question. Have you found that some plant-based protein sources do not work well in a shelf-stable protein bar format?
I'll try to answer this one. This is a fun one. So I think, first I'll kind of say, as Brent mentioned earlier in one of the slides, plant proteins have been around and are a lot less developed than whey and milk proteins that have been around for quite a while. So I think, when we're looking at different plant-based proteins, there are some that work better in applications than others. But I think, generally, we do see some flavor or texture hurdles working with different plant-based proteins, but I think that's where things like blends of proteins or, considering different process technologies to kind of hide any undesirable off notes can come into play and make a lot of different plant proteins work. I think overall, plant-based proteins do have their challenges, but like cautiously optimistic side of me, and I think what we've seen a lot here is that a lot of them can work in some form or another in a bar.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, just want to say a thank you to Brent and Megan today. Excellent presentation, and really extend a big thank you to everyone who's attended. Please reach out to us with any questions, and we would be happy to connect further to discuss this important topic. This now will conclude today's presentation. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.